This is Joe Melky with Snap Fabrications, representing Certiflat weld tables. Today I'm going to do an instructional video on how to assemble your Certiflat Pro table. Upon receiving your weld table, the first thing you want to do is going to look over your build sheet and make sure that you received all the parts for your weld table. Once you've confirmed that you do have all your parts, the first thing that we're going to do is look at the tabletop surface itself. What we want to do is we want to find if there's a crown to the table, meaning that if there's a high spot in the center of the table. Using a straight edge diagonally from corner to corner is the easiest way to find out if there's a crown to the table. And whichever side the crown is on is the side that we're going to want down. I already located the side which the crown was on, and I can see a slight gap right here, so the crown is down and we'll be able to suck the center flat. So that's how we want to do that. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to lay out the support structure which actually will make this table flat. Now this is the Certiflat 3 foot by 4 foot Pro table, and the underside of the table has ribs running lengthwise both the long way and short way of the table, and that structure is what makes the table flat. These parts are cut with a tab and slot configuration to interlock into both the table and to the cross members underneath, and everything being precision laser cut. When this stuff is clamped together and welded together, we'll make sure that this table is completely flat. Now for assembling your table, you can really do it on any surface, whether you have a wooden workbench or a metal workbench, anything that's relatively flat. I have mine sitting on another welding table, but that's not necessary for you to do. We're actually going to sit this table up on a couple 2x4s so that our table is not part of the straightening or flattening process. The ribbed structure underneath is what's going to create the flat surface of this table. So the first thing I'll do is get this up on a couple blocks. With that said, if you don't have a table surface to work on, that's okay. You could actually assemble this table on a set of sawhorses with a couple 2x4s laid across it. When I lit the 2x4s underneath this table, you'll see what I mean. So we're going to elevate the table top for the table that we're assembling up off of the support structure that we're working on, whether it's another welding table or a set of sawhorses. Now what this will allow us to do is to lay out our support structure and start clamping it together and draw any crown that there might be into the table out, making this table completely flat. Now the number of pieces of support ribs that your table has will kind of be dependent on the size of table that you purchase. This being a 3 foot by 4 foot, it actually has 5 support ribs running the short way and 4 support ribs running the long way. In this setup, the short support ribs go in first, and it really can go only together one way. What I can say is if you start assembling it and it's not going together right, or the parts won't interlock, that just means that you put the wrong parts in first. So we've got our 5 short support ribs in. Now the 4 long ribs will go in. And as you can see, these parts just drop together. It's all interlocking. The ribs are interlocking, and the ribs also have, like I said, the tab and slots that interlock into the table surface itself. Really, all of the components to this table should go together that easily. If you're fighting something, you might be assembling the table wrong. Now that I have the support structure in there, I can see that my 4 corners are laying flat against the table, and I can see that I have gap using a flashlight, I can shine a light underneath these support rails and see where the gap is. And that's because we talked about the crown. I put the crown down, so now we can draw the center of the table in, and it'll flatten everything right out. Now, clamping. Several ways you can do that. If you have fixture table clamps, I could drop those right into these holes and use the clamp to draw the table and the support structure together and close any gaps that I might have. If I had deep jaw vise clamps, I could use that. C-clamps, I could use those. One thing that is relatively inexpensive and easy to use are U-bolts like this here. Just these holes are 2 inches on center. You can find these at a hardware store. I picked these up for $1 a piece, and they're actually just right as far as the width to drop down in 2 holes right across a pair of support rails where they intersect one another. And even by hand tightening these nuts, it's drawing that crown down flat against the support rails. The tabletop itself is not what makes these tables flat. It's the support structure underneath, and clamping the table to that support structure is what makes these tables flat. So I'm going to take some care to clamping this down in spots where there might be gaps. Again, using my flashlight, I can shine underneath and see where there's gaps between the support structure and the tabletop itself. So I'm going to clamp this one down, draw it in tight, and clamp some other sections where I do see some gaps, and we'll come right back. Okay, now with the U-bolts, I've put them in each cross section on the interior of the table where the crown was at. And just tighten them down snug. You don't need to over torque or really tighten these bolts down to get the table to flatten out. And just with my pen light here, I can just look and try to shine the light underneath these ribs, and if I don't see any light coming through underneath the rib, I'm confident that this table is flat. So what I'm going to do next is I'm just going to drop a couple tack welds on the interior of this table because I'm confident that the center is flat. I still don't have any clamps on my exterior ribs, but I'm not concerned about them right now. What I want to make sure is that the center is drawn in tight. I've done that. I'm going to drop some tack welds just to hold everything in place. I'll clamp the exterior. We'll flip the table over. I'll check the table for flatness with my straight edge again. And if I'm confident that my table is flat, I don't have any gaps between the tabletop and any of the support structure, I'll start tack welding every tab and slot connection in the table surface and jump around the table with my tack welds. Once I've tack welded all of them, I'll check the table again for flatness. If the table is still flat and straight according to my straight edge, I've done my job right, and I'll come back and I'll finish weld every one of those tabs. So what we'll do now, do some tack welds on the interior of the table where I've got it clamped together, and we'll see you after that. Now I've laid all my tack welds in on the interior section of the table. Good penetrating tack welds to hold it all together. Now what I'll end up doing is I'll remove these 6 clamps that are on the interior part of the table, and then I'll move them to the corners and probably a couple in the centers on the long side just to clamp the perimeter of the table down, and we'll come back after that. Okay, so as you can see, the table's been flipped over right side up. I've repositioned the U-bolts to clamp around the perimeter, put some C-clamps where I needed to draw the table down to make everything flat. With my straight edge, I just check a bunch of different spots, from lengthwise, diagonally, in the short way, in a bunch of different places, just to verify that the table is flat. If I've drawn the table surface down to the support structure evenly and at every intersection, the table should be flat. If for some reason there would be a part that wouldn't be flat at this time, that's why I only put tack welds in there. If I find that I had a high spot, I could go in and remove a tack weld and reposition or draw it down with another clamp if there was a problem. But as the way everything sits right now, you know, we're good and flat. I'm happy with where I'm at. So with everything clamped in place, I'll come back now with the welder and I'll tack every tab on the table, just jumping around different spots so I don't concentrate heat in one spot too much. And after all the tack welds are in, I'll remove all the clamps, check to make sure the table is still flat, and if everything is still flat, come back in with another round of welds, this time full penetration welds in every tab, and the tabletop will be done. So, tack weld time. All the welds are complete on our pro table here, and one last check with the straight edge confirms that our table is still flat. If you followed the same steps that I've shown here, your table should be flat as well. Mine is. I'm happy with it. If you used a MIG welder, you might want to check for MIG splatter. That can throw off your straight edge. If your welds are up above the tab slots, you might need to grind those off so you're not getting any interference with your level or straight edge. Other than that, the table's complete. If you purchased our leg kit, you'll want to watch the next video to watch the assembly of that. If you're making your own legs, that's fine too, or this table can be used on top of another work surface, on top of sawhorses or another workbench. So yeah, this table's complete. Thanks for watching the video, and go weld something.